School is out, the pool is open, and I made a list. Not a list of games that happened to come out in June. Not 10 famous cartridges with a beach towel thrown over the picture. 10 Super Nintendo games that actually play like summer. The heat, the water, the backyard, the road trip. The feeling that you have nowhere else to be. And I held myself to one rule. A summer game has to play like summer. The release date does not get a vote. So tonight, we're opening Nintendo Month with that list. And I have something new. This little device right here. This is the Ambernic RG Cube. It's a $60 handheld that plays every game on tonight's list. And no affiliate link, we paid for this ourselves. Not a paid recommendation. Just a device in the games, and the honest answer to one question. What does it actually play? This is episode 5 of Playing Out of Control, Plays Like Summer. Alright, welcome back to Playing Out of Control. I'm Adam Richardson. Some of you may know me as Maniac. Some as Arcus Maximus. And a few as Fire Breathing Buddy. This is Playing Out of Control Gaming's podcast. We're a retro and classic game review site from PC to Nintendo and everything in between. Going all the way back to 1998. Alright, guys. This week in retro news. Nintendo Month opens with an ending. Nintendo has announced that it will stop selling the original Switch family to retailers in Europe in mid-February of 2027. It's a big deal, right? This is because Europe has a new law in regards to this. So, we'll see how this works out. They confirmed that we'll still have them here in America and other places. It's not a worldwide retirement, but this is the end date, right? It's been almost 10 years after the original Switch launched in March of 2017. The new European Union battery rules, they take effect in February of 2027. And so rather than redesign a console from 2017 around the user replaceable battery, Nintendo is retiring the old models there. So the Switch 2 is getting a revised European model this autumn with the user replaceable battery, which I hope they bring that to America. But the capacity does change slightly. And they're revising the Joy-Con controllers as well. But a replaceable battery is a preservation feature. I have old handhelds here, and they're dead. They got swollen batteries, and you can't buy the batteries. You can't buy the D-pads. You can't buy certain things. It's not that those machines they stopped being good. They didn't. But the lithium ion, one of the pouches or cells inside of it, just said, I'm done. And the entire machine was designed like that would never happen, but it did. So at least in Europe, right to repair law may have ended one version of a console like the Switch. But it's also forced the next version to be built differently. And that's the great things, because if you think the retro handhelds of 2040 may be the first generation of retro handhelds that you can keep alive with a screwdriver. You can buy parts for legally and not get in trouble from Nintendo, and you can replace parts easily. The other thing an end date does is it turns the Switch into future retro hardware. So that Switch 1 of mine here, in 10 years time, it's 10 years old now, but in another 10 years it'll be 20 years old, and it will definitely be retro. It's pretty much almost retro now if you think about it, even though there's new games coming out. Time flies, trust me. And Nintendo was not finished handing out definite dates this week though. They announced that Mario Kart Tour shuts down on September 30th. It had 100 million downloads when it first came out. In October, it doesn't just become harder to find, it stops existing completely. That's the problem that we talk on often is digital only games, bad things happen when they go away. They just don't exist anymore. There's no physical copy like the ones on my shelf here that I can still play. When a digital copy gets delisted, that's it. No more. So, wasn't just Nintendo though. In the same week, Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis was delisted from Steam, ahead of a full shutdown on October 6th. That game launched in 2023. 3 years. That's all we got. Nobody has to end physical media to erase a game. Live service does it on a schedule. Anyway. Now, we look at Germany's game archive for one of the biggest pure preservation stories of the week. The International Computer Game Collection in Germany is being wound down. It began in 2019 as a joint project that included the Computer Games Museum in Berlin, and it grew into what's been described as the largest publicly accessible game archive in the world. More than 60,000 catalog games, cartridges, CDs, floppy disks, DVDs, Blu-rays, all of it. They're shutting it down. All the manuals, the packaging, hardware. Not one person's collection locked in a storage unit. It's a public archive built so people could study it. Its public funding, roughly 1.5 million euros from the Berlin Senate and the Federal Cultural Commissioner, expired at the end of April. The federal ministry that inherited the games policy looked at permanent institutional funding and concluded that it was, quote, not economically viable. The shareholders voted unanimously to shut it down. And right now, the future of the database covering these 60,000 titles is unresolved. We've talked about this. I've wrote a number of editorials recently about these words in different forms of these words, but the phrase not economically viable. And we recently, if you were following the news for some of the ROM stuff and preservation, you probably have heard those words again in a fan version of this story. MyRent, the fan-run preservation archive holding roughly 390 terabytes, shut down over infrastructure costs. They said it wasn't economically viable. Fan money couldn't keep that archive alive. Now public money can't keep the German one alive. The last episode I told you the discs are ending. This week, the world's biggest public game archive lost its funding. The thing we have to remember is preservation is not someone else's job. There is no somebody else. That's why I've been rebuilding this site and pulling off old reviews and old news and stuff from zip drives and zip disks and the archive.org, and that's why my whole restoration project exists. And that's why every person that has a cartridge, when some of these old cartridges like I have back here, or the old manuals, or an old hard drive alive, is doing more than collecting clutter. Sometimes the clutter's the last copy. Yeah. Anyway, we'll move on from there to, let's look at the Xbox reset. The Xbox story also moved from reports to an official announcement this week. Microsoft is cutting 3,200 jobs from Xbox. That's about 20% of the division of Xbox. People keep saying, oh, Microsoft only cut 3 or 4% of their company, but they cut 20% of Xbox. 1,600 people were cut immediately. They were out the door before they even knew what was going on. The rest of the reductions, besides the ones that they already fired, they're expected to be by the end of the year, but 4 of the studios have been divested. So Double Fine, Compulsion Games, Ninja Theory, Undead Labs. Now together, these studios account for roughly 350 people. They're being sold or spun off, or being spun out into their own company, or buying themselves freedom. Arcane is likely the 5th, but a French law requires consultation with the studio's Works Council. So that one remains pending. Xbox chief executive Asha Sharma called this, quote, the most significant restructure in Xbox history. She also said, quote, our business today is not healthy. That is unusually plain language from a corporate executive, and I'll give her credit for saying it plainly. But plain language does not make the consequences smaller. id Software reportedly lost 136 people out of a studio of roughly 185 people. Now think about it. id didn't get a chance to spin off, or they didn't get a chance to go and change themselves by being like bought out by somebody else or anything like that. The reporting was saying half of the studio is cut. That's most of it. And the great John Romero responded publicly. He said, quote, I know how devastating it is, and my heart is with you all. John Carmack response came a little bit later, and this is the one I keep coming back to. Years ago, Carmack said, I believe Microsoft will be a good steward of id. This week he said that belief, quote, isn't aging well. His response was more complicated than simple outrage. He acknowledged that id may have looked marginal on Microsoft's books. He said beloved games still have to succeed. And then he added, quote, "You cannot rule out the possibility that executives are idiots." That's what John Carmack said. I'm not improving that quote or improvising it or anything like that. He said it. And probably ain't wrong, because from what I know, the executives are idiots. Really big idiots sometimes. He also said this, quote, "The game isn't over, and I hope the studio rallies through." End quote. There is genuinely good outcome in this story. Double Fine and Compulsion are leaving with their intellectual property. VGC described that as, quote, "an outcome that preserves our history." That is the one good sentence in the entire announcement. And then there's this. One of the people cut by Microsoft was 37-year company veteran who helped lead the Xbox backwards compatibility program. The people who made the old library playable are now part of the reset. Now, part 3 of the subsidy, you've seen the parts 1 and 2 already, but part 3 goes live as soon as this podcast is live. One quick small correction from last week from episode 4. I don't like to not correct something that I may have done wrong, because facts move. I want to correct what I said wrong. And that was, Sony has told publishers that they will be able to keep making discs if they want to for back catalog items. So that's for existing games. After January 2028, they'll be able to make those games. Now, the cutoff applies to all new releases, though. So it's less bad than it was, but it's still bad because new games still face a future where the retail box is only going to be a download code. Moving on, hardware and preservation tech this week. The RetroTink 4K can now decode Lumicode. So, in plain English, Lumicode is a modification standard that can pull a clean digital picture out of original consoles like the NES. So, the flagship RetroTink upscaler now understands that signal directly. This is an experimental firmware for this, but the NES has been tested and early users should expect bugs, but it's doing the part of retro hardware, and it deserves more attention, right? I love this stuff, and making these original machines work better, and we're getting cleaner pictures and more repairable hardware, and without throwing away stuff. So that's preservation as well. All right, now to the quick hits. These are just the quick little stories. All of these are on the website, so if you ever want to read the full story, you can. 5 Game Boy games joined Nintendo Switch Online this week, headlined by Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3. Minecraft is now running on an original Game Boy Color through a downloadable project called Minicraft, putting real 3D on hardware never designed for it. A 1992 Sega Mega CD exclusive, Mahou no Suju, Silky Lip. It just got an English fan translation after 34 years being locked in Japan. And Ubusuna may not be dead after all. Hiroshi Lucci said he still owns the original concept and the system specifications for his planned Karagugu successor. But a small team has gathered around the project and funding talks have started, so completion is not guaranteed, but it may continue. And Evercade launched a $69 Activision Super Pocket with 34 games. Now, the prices in the UK and Europe have been raised for this device, blaming memory demand because of AI, obviously. Cartridges moved from £19 and 39 pence to £24 and 99 pence. And the Super Pocket moved from £49 and 99 pence to £59 and 99 pence. The United States prices at this moment are unchanged, but I do expect them to go up. This is where we're at. Now it's hitting the retro consoles. So that's the news. So let's open up the archive. So this month in POCG history, we had a few things this month. Let's see. Usually this segment looks at the exact week from 1998, 1999, or 2000. And the second week of July is a little thin in the archive, right? So I'm using the month fall back tonight. So, what were we covering in the month of July 1999? A little bit of everything, really. On July 5th, we published a review of Might and Magic 7. That was the shape of PC gaming back then. Huge RPGs, big manuals, boxes that took up half a shelf, and a review written for people who expected a game to keep them busy all summer. That same July batch included reviews for Machines, MotoGP Racing Simulation 2, and Animaniacs: A Gigantic Adventure. This is all the old POCG in one list: a fantasy role-playing game, a real-time strategy game about machines building machines, motorcycle simulator, and the Animaniacs. If someone on the shelf played it, we covered it. So if somebody on the staff played it, we covered it. And in the news that month, 3DO Company, 3DO, we talked about them last week, they had raised $43 million through an offering of common stock. At the time, that sounded like the company funding its future. Today, we know how quickly that future changed. 3DO stopped making hardware and became a software publisher, and eventually faded away. The financial announcement survived longer than the company, right? That's kind of the way it goes sometimes. That's the strange thing about restoring the site. It's the small stories that kind of become important stories. A press release, like I mentioned last week, a press release you didn't think twice about back then, 1999. It becomes a record of what a vanished company believed its future would be. A review of a game sitting in a big cardboard box becomes evidence of how people actually talked about it when it was new. The archive does not know which piece will matter later. We just wrote it, and it's all there in the archive now. And some of it's more important than other things. Some of the news stories are kind of more important now when you look back at them than some of the reviews. And so now I want to bring a little piece of the lab into the show. So what it plays, the Embernic RG Cube XX. That would be this little device right here that we talked about earlier. And this is a new segment. You're going to see some more of this here in the future on the podcast, if you're watching or if you're listening. But we're calling it What It Plays and what it works like. So one device held right here, and what it means. Just kind of try to answer you the question that really matters. Because the spec sheet says this console can do this. It's got these really fast processor. It's got this good battery life. But the spec sheet always says something like that, no matter what you remember. It cost about $60. And I think I actually got it for less than that. But I bought it from a real store with my own money. And here's the whole gimmick. And it's a good one. This handheld right here has a 1-to-1 screen. And now you say, what's 1-to-1 mean? That kind of sounds strange until you remember the Game Boy screen is nearly square. So it's a vertical arcade cabinet, right? They're square. Now on widescreen handhelds, those games sit inside heavy black borders. But on this machine, they use the screen properly. Super Nintendo and the Genesis, you're going to have a little bit of border on this system compared to on a system like that. But I'll say this about this system, it's really great. It's probably one of the funnest handhelds that I've played in this price range yet. And the screen looks amazing. And that's what it is. So what does it run great? That's really the key thing with these systems is what does it run great? And for this one, it runs pretty much everything to the PlayStation 1 great. Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo, Super Nintendo. A lot of DOS games are on here that you can have ported on there. They're harder to play on a controller, obviously. I tried to play Wolfenstein 3D on this thing, and it ran great. It's just hard as crap to play. But arcade games, Game Gear games, PlayStation 1 games, these are excellent performance here. So it plays Nintendo 64 games, Mario 64, Mario Kart, games like that. And it plays the lighter end of the Dreamcast with some frame skip. Now, games you don't want to probably play on here is Nintendo DS games. They run fine, run great. But 2 screens squeezed on a square display is not a great experience. And I'll say games I wouldn't play on here, PSP games. You can get PSP games on here, but they're widescreen, and this is a perfectly one-to-one square screen. And so when you're playing a PSP game, it just doesn't look right. It's really small and in the middle. And then really don't even consider playing PlayStation 2 games or GameCube games, anything newer than that. They're just not going to run. It was never built for that. And I see people review some of this stuff, and they're judging system on how they handle handhelds is wrong. You judge this machine on what it was built to do. I'm not going to judge this handheld on saying it doesn't run Xbox 360. It doesn't play PlayStation 2. Yeah, it wasn't built to do that. So here's why I'm showing you what it does tonight, because every game on tonight's summer list sits in the run great tier. Donkey Kong Country, EarthBound, Zombies Ate My Neighbors, all 10. This is the take the list to the pool machine, right? Because we're going to be talking about the top 10 summer games for the Super Nintendo, and this thing, you can put them all on there and you can play them wherever. And so now, it's not a perfect machine. I did not give this a perfect rating, and let me tell you, because there are some honest flaws, because there's always honest flaws on anything. This machine has known, and it's happened to me, that the sleep mode can drain the battery. This happens. It cost me a Master System save. I've been playing through all the Master System games and reviewing them, and it killed my save. So make sure you save your game. Use a save state in RetroArch or whatever, however way you want to save it before you put this thing in your pocket or throw it over on the table or nightstand or something like that, and you're not charging it. Make sure you save it. And also, one little great thing about this console is it's got a mini HDMI port, so you can hook it up to a bigger screen if you wanted to. If you want to let other people watch, or if you want to record game footage like I've done some. So, full reviews up on the site. So, if you want to read the whole review, see the pictures and everything, go hit us up at pocg.net. And, I should tell you, I give it a 4.5 review. Excellent score. I think this is the budget king if you want a handheld that's in this range right now. I just bought it. I wanted to see how it played, what it did. That was the whole thing. And so it's just my opinion. All right. So here we are. This is the key thing for this episode. And that's the 10 SNES games that play like summer. So let's kick this thing off. It's July. Nintendo month is here, right? I told you last month that this month was going to be Nintendo month for us. So it starts right now with this first top 10 list of the best Super Nintendo games for summer. Now, every game site does a summer games list. And let's be honest, most of them are kind of stretching the truth on it because they take whatever blockbuster game happened to ship in August. Whatever game like that, and they throw a beach towel on the header and they call it summer games. A great role-playing game that came out the week school let out in June is still a great role-playing game, but it's not automatically a summer game, right? So I like to do my list a little bit different. This list, I had one rule, and I held myself to it. A summer game is a game that makes you feel like summer. It just plays like summer. Maybe it's got the beach in it. Maybe it's got a town called summer. Maybe it's got seasons that are summer. Maybe it's got a little bit of everything. It's got a pool, got an island, backyard. So that feeling that you have when you have nowhere else to be, you just want to soak up that feeling. So for me, the calendar, it's not getting a vote. And that rule's going on all month because we're going to be doing Super Nintendo this week, Nintendo 64 next week for its 30th summer. And then after that, we're going to be doing the Game Boy because, hey, the Game Boy, its anniversary's coming up here in July, and at the end of July. So anyway, let's go to the 10 cartridges that made this week's list. I'm going to rank them for you. Let me give you the games that define summer to me. Number 1, Donkey Kong Country. Now, Donkey Kong Country, it's just quintessential summer, right? It's Donkey Kong Island's a tropical postcard, a jungle canopy. You've got all the stuff that makes it feel like summer. And just waterfalls, sand, an ocean behind every level. But let's be honest, this game, and this is the game that came out that really turned Nintendo's fortunes in the Super Nintendo era. And the graphics and the design and everything, but the key thing that seals this for number one for me is the water. There is a level called Coral Capers that drops you beneath the surface, and one of the most famous pieces of music on the entire system. So you got David Wise, Aquatic Ambience, that song, that music. It was like the first track that he ever made as a full-time Rare employee, and he wrote it while trying to recreate the wave sounds of a Korg wave station synthesizer on a Super Nintendo sound chip. And he had no business trying to do that, but Aquatic Ambience, that song, man, that soundtrack, it just makes you think about the water. And the whole game just kind of slows down as you're playing it. The enemies are still there. The level still wants to kill you, but man, it's just something else. For a few minutes, it's like you're there. And it's just a place. And that's what this whole list I'm trying to capture. It's a place, it's a feeling. Nothing else on this system even comes close to how that one makes you feel. And for me, at least, summer-wise. Now, number 2 is EarthBound. Now, EarthBound, we've talked a lot about EarthBound this year on the news because that someone remade Mother in the EarthBound engine. But EarthBound is the one that actually captures that feeling of being a kid off in the summer when you got a few months off. At least if you're an American kid, that you didn't have the year-round school and everything. So now I said no days, but Mother came out on June 5th, 1995. And now that's like right there at summer for us. And so I remember the rule. The date doesn't get to be on the list. But this game gets to be on the list because EarthBound's a road trip. You leave home and you keep moving town to town across a cartoon version of America. The soundtrack moves through surf rock, lounge music, and songs that sound like the Beach Boys after a few drinks. There's literally a beach resort town called Summers in the game. And the whole game has that strange summer break logic where anything can happen because the adults are not really paying attention. You're just a kid with a baseball bat leaving home to save the world. You stop at diners, you take buses, you stay in motels and tourist traps, and you find places that feel enormous in a game like this. It was really amazing. And every other role-playing game at this time or around this time, they wanted to be grand and dark and self-serious. But EarthBound is sunburned, strange, and a little ridiculous. It knows exactly what it's doing. It's the Great American Road Trip on a cartridge. So that's why it's number 2. This is the sleeper. Zombies Ate My Neighbors. And you're like, whoa, that's a... Now, Zombies Ate My Neighbors is a suburban summer turned into a B-movie. You run through backyards, swimming pools, shopping centers, cul-de-sacs. You rescue the neighbors with squirt guns, pod people. You got giant babies and guys with chainsaws. Like I said, you're using a squirt gun and you're finding this stuff. This is before everything had to be like machine guns and everything else like that for kids games. Listen, it's a great game. Zombies Ate My Neighbors. It's a marathon in a cartridge form. It's built for 2 players. It has the right pace. It has the right jokes. And underneath the movie monster gloss, it's genuinely a great game. Now, I actually ranked this at number 6, and maybe that's too low. Now, the rest of the 10, there's a lot of great games. Number 5, Super Mario Kart, Koopa Beach, right there in the game. Outdoor racing in summer by default. Yoshi's Island's number 8, and it may be the most summer-looking game on the Super Nintendo. It's a tropical island drawn in crayon and pastel. Bright flowers, open skies, a baby screaming every time you make one mistake. And that last part is summer vacation too, because depending on the trip, you've been there, right? Secret of Mana, number 9, I know my buddy JR, he mentioned this is his top game when I was asking him what he thought was the best games of summer. And it's 3 players, 1 couch, 1 screen. That's a sleepover, right? Yeah. And I remember having sleepovers when I was 8 or 9 and having friends over for the summer and playing these games. And now, this one right here, and if I went on favorite games, it would be the number 7 game. That would be my favorite game for this list. Because when I think of summer break and games I played in summer, Pilot Wings was my game. It was like, I loved flight simulators, but Pilot Wings wasn't really flight simulator, but it was my first really introduction to those type of games. And flying over the turquoise waters in a hang glider, nothing but the sky and the island below you, nowhere else to be. It's great times. And Harvest Moon closes out the list at number 10. It actually has summer. That's actually part of the gameplay, and it's kind of played at the pace of July with nothing else being scheduled. Oh, and now one of my favorite games ever, number 4 for summer. Not doing these in any particular order, obviously, but Goof Troop. Island vacation, pirates, puzzles, jumping over logs, running from people. Come on, that game right there. And it was two-player co-op, right? And that's the thing I miss most about these Super Nintendo games. Everything was co-op, and you could play with your friends, and your friend can sabotage you within the first 30 seconds of the game, because that's what usually friends like to do. But now, number 3 on the list. You guys got to stick with me on this one, but come on. Cool Spot. Cool Spot. The 7-Up, the soda, the Sprite-like soda. The red dot from the 7-Up bottle was a mascot, and they made it into a series of games, and one of those games is called Cool Spot. And honestly, it turned into one of the best looking platform games on the Super Nintendo. And you had the beach levels, the bright colors, you had surfing, sunshine. That game looks aside like an advertisement for a convenience store during summer. It was advertising, but you know what? It was a good game too. And so I guess both of those things can happen at the same time. Now, there were some games I rejected that did not make the list that some people suggested should make the list. But Chrono Trigger came out in August of 1995. Chrono Trigger didn't make the list. It's a runner-up, right? Because it is one of the greatest games ever made, but it's not really a summer game, right? Same thing with Super Mario World and Super Mario All-Stars and Street Fighter II Turbo. They all came out in the summer. They were all great games and cartridges and stuff like that, but they didn't have the summer feel, right? They didn't have the beaches and all that stuff. They didn't have, oh man, this just feels like summer break. They were just summer game releases, not summer games. So that's the entire point of this list. So stop pretending that those are the same thing. Just because a game came out during the summer doesn't make it a summer game. To me. Anyway, full top 10 ranked list is on the website now. It's part of our top loader series, and it's called the Top 10 Super Nintendo Entertainment System Games That Play Like Summer. And I put in there at the bottom, you can see those reject ones as well, and you can go argue with my order. You don't like it, that's up to you. But load one of these games up and find a fan and a cold drink and find a CRT if you got one, and tell me when the season's over. As we close out this episode, I want to ask you my question of the week. Last week, I asked you for the most American game in your collection. Now, I had some people tell me Grand Theft Auto 5. That was like the number one response I got. And so, we all have opinions, and I think Grand Theft Auto probably is the most American games that you can ever think about, even though it was made in this country. The most American games most of them were made in Japan or somewhere in Europe. Only a handful of the most American style games were made in America. Sometimes you had games like the Oregon Trail where it's made in America, or Duke Nukem, but then sometimes they're made in Scotland like Grand Theft Auto. But what is your summer Nintendo 64 game? And remember the rule. It has to play like summer. Just because it came out in June or July doesn't mean it's summer. So defend your pick. Let me know. Leave us a comment on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Post a message up on the forum at pocg.net/forum. Let us know. And tell me why you think that game's summer. Tell me what the game looks like and what it sounds like and what makes you think, hey, this is summer. Next week, Nintendo Month moves on to the Nintendo 64. So, I'm looking forward to that. We've got Wave Racer, right? You know that's going to be on the list. Mario Kart, Pilot Wings. Same rule. The game that has to play like the season. So, we'll see what all makes my top 10 list for Nintendo 64 summer style games. Remember, everything from tonight is available at pocg.net. The Restoration Project, the Cube XX review, the full Super Nintendo summer list. Pretty much everything. So, anyway, comments are open on YouTube. Everything else, Blue Sky, Mastodon, Reddit, everything I said is on pocg.net. And remember, this is POCG. No bought scores, no filters, just opinions. I'm Adam Richardson. This has been your host tonight, and thank you for listening to Playing Out of Control.